Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. NATO leaders are gathering in Turkey for this year's summit as the alliance confronts a rapidly changing security landscape. The war in Ukraine continues with no end in sight. Instability in the Middle East remains high, and allies are under growing pressure to strengthen their defense capabilities and share more of the security burden. President Lee Jae Myung has also arrived in Ankara, where he's joining meetings with NATO and Indo-Pacific leaders while promoting closer defense cooperation and new opportunities for Korea's defense industry. To discuss the summit's key agenda, what it means for the alliance, and the implications for South Korea, we are joined in the studio by Go Myung-hyun, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. A big welcome, Dr. Go.
It's good to be with you.
And also joining us online is Lee Jae Myung, news presenter on A News. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start a discussion right away. This year's NATO summit comes amid growing concerns over the alliance's unity, with issues like Greenland and the U.S.-Iran tensions in the spotlight. What was the atmosphere like on the ground?
Well, Mok-yeon, I can start by saying that it is a historic summit. I know that when it comes to NATO or the alliance, we always say that the summits are historic. But in this case, as some high-ranking officials have stated, the summit is indeed a little historic. Because why is that, you may ask? Because, as you have mentioned, the Iran tensions are quite important. And we have situations that is unfolding about Strait of Hormuz that affects everyone, including the Middle East and Asia as well. So when we consider all of these, when we melt all of these into a pot, we can safely say that the summit itself is in a really important environment, is unfolding in a really important environment. And I may additionally also say that the NATO summit is a part of the situation that is still dealing with the Russia-Ukraine war, and also defense budgets are quite important. So these are the times that NATO and the allies outside of the NATO, such as South Korea themselves, which is a great ally for Turkey and great ally for NATO also, are holding a strong importance among all. So the atmosphere was, of course, tough, like every single summit that is happening. I was happily joining APEC summit in Seoul last year, also G20s, etc. It is also always a little bit hectic, but it is indeed very important, and everyone is happy to be here.
Right. It certainly sounds like the atmosphere reflects a lot of challenges facing the alliance. Now, let's go to Dr. Go. So against this backdrop, with the war in Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East, what is the biggest significance of this year's summit?
Well, always the importance of a summit like this is the fact that it's been able to bring together the allies in the same table, in the same spot, and discuss a common agenda. I mean, this seems rather normal things to say. After all, like the NATO members are allies with each other, but we have to understand that the NATO is going through a sort of crisis right now, especially with President Trump being very critical of the NATO allies for the fact that NATO allies such as France and Germany and the United Kingdom didn't assist the United States in the previous conflict between the United States and Iran in the Persian Gulf. So President Trump has been threatening to either reduce the U.S. troop levels in Europe or withdraw them altogether. So in this backdrop, in the backdrop of a conflict and tension between United States and its European allies, bring them, the leaders of the United States and the other NATO leaders in the same room is in itself a major achievement. So in that sense, I think that's probably the most important optics that we have to discuss. Second is that NATO is also trying to explore ways to coexist with the United States that's critical of the allies. So Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, has proposed a new framework to relate to the United States, between the United States and NATO. He calls it the NATO 3.0. So this is essentially the idea that NATO is going to reflect some of the demands that President Trump has put on the table on the allies, which is the allies spending more of its own resources for its own defense. Basically, that translates to increasing the military budget. And that's exactly what's been going on with the European allies of the United States. It's been increasing its share of the defense spending. So it's going to reach a 5% of the GDP in 10 years' time. So I think Secretary General Rutte has been showcasing this to President Trump and essentially is trying to package the whole more commitment by the European allies as a new form of NATO. And it remains to be seen whether President Trump is going to accept this picture or not. But nonetheless, I think there are progress in that regard. I mean, there are efforts on both sides to patch over the tension between Washington and Europe. And I think in that sense, I think we have to lower the bar when it comes to evaluating the achievements that NATO has reached so far.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we stay with defense, Dr. Go, President Trump has been urging Europe to spend more on defense, while NATO is pushing with higher defense spending targets. How could this change this burden sharing and the way alliance operates?
Well, it's not really about burden sharing. I mean, it's more burden shifting. So the logic on the part of President Trump, I mean, the logic behind President Trump's criticism of U.S. allies, the NATO members of the European members of NATO, has been that that United States was bearing the disproportionate burden of Europe's defense rather than its own defense. And then, as I described earlier, Secretary General Rutte's proposal about NATO 3.0 is exactly that the European members of the NATO are going to spend more of its own budget for its own defense. So therefore, what it means is NATO is now committed to spend 5% of GDP every year, and then out of this 5%, 3.5% is going to be the core defense budget, meaning this is a budget spent on the direct military spending, such as weapons procurement, military maintenance, and operations. And the rest of the budget, which is 1.5% of GDP, is going to be about the indirect spending, such as immigration enforcement and so forth. So the total amount of additional expenditure that NATO has committed to spend the next 10 years is going to amount to more or less $1 trillion over 10 years. So this is a very significant amount of money. And this is exactly a message that President Trump would like to hear from the U.S. allies around the world. So I think in that sense, if this message goes down well with President Trump, it's going to really mark the second half of President Trump's relationship with European allies in a more positive light.
Mm-hmm. A significant shift would it be? Now, going back to Ms. Sacholu, on the ground, which issues drew the most attention, and how are experts there assessing President Trump's comments on Ukraine and the future U.S. support?
Well, when we talk about the approach of President Trump, let me underline once again what Professor Go said, because those were really initially really important to think that he needs the 5%. He needs the 5% defense budget from all of the members. And he keeps saying that he's not happy with the NATO members, not all of them, not the European flag of NATO. He's very vocal about it because this is his leadership style, to be very vocal about it. For example, he is also giving so friendly pictures with President Erdogan. He's saying that he loves him, and this is not a kind of diplomacy that we were expecting from previous leaders of the United States, but this is how he does his business, because he's a businessman. In addition to that, also, it is the Ukraine war that we are focusing on quite a lot. And all of the experts we are told we had the chance to talk with on the press conferences, and also the when we were having the opportunity to approach them, they're saying that Russia-Ukraine war is, again, quite important. And NATO still takes, even it's in third generation, even it's 3.0, NATO still takes the Russia as a great aggressor against NATO. So 1.0 was the Cold War and 2.0 was the continuation, and now 3.0, and we are still talking about Russia. This is what is being spoken on the field. In addition to all of these, if I may also add that the atmosphere about the US approach is also always about the industry of defense. Why? Because the United States is a great producer of the defense industry, such as South Korea themselves, such as Türkiye is taking such important initial activities about this situation. So when we again put all of these in situation, what is going on in NATO? What is going on with the US policy? Yes, they have two different approaches, but both of them are mentioning one thing, and they need to be able to defend every single part of the NATO soil, and they have to act accordingly.
So I must say that we have to apologize for the network connection. I think we're observing some delays and some problems with that, but we've got the essence of your message. So let me ask you another question about the Indo-Pacific region. Leaders from South Korea and other countries also attended the summit. How is NATO's growing engagement with the region being viewed over there?
Well, the connection is probably because the leaders are having important conversations, so hence the gems and everything. I'm sorry about that. But in addition to that, to answer your question, the Indo-Pacific is literally one of the most important situations right now. As you know, the Lee Jae Myung was here, and then President Erdogan and Lee Jae Myung has a really important meetings. They had the defense. There was actually a NATO sidelines meeting in the Defense Industry Summit, which Türkiye has been putting a great amount of intelligence and then power into this situation. And we know that it is being reflected in Türkiye that it is a really strong suit of South Korea as well. So Indo-Pacific is one of the most important places for NATO to have an alignment with, not only for Türkiye to have a organic relationship with South Korea, despite the distance between the countries, they're really close, but also the fact that what is unfolding in the world at the moment is not just about what is happening in the Middle East, it's not just about what is happening in Europe, it is also about what is happening at the Far East. So when we take a look at the aggressions from China, when we take a look at the situations that can happen inside all of these regions, we know that it is quite important for NATO to go hand in hand with allies as important as South Korea. And then also the Indo-Pacific partnerships are more important than ever because the world is shifting into another direction. And that direction is very much tied to relationship between those countries as well. So what I'm seeing here is that not only the NATO countries, not only the member countries, but countries like the Indo-Pacific countries who are the great allies and friends of those NATO countries are taken into importance, and so much of cooperation talks has been going on in the names of defense industry also during the sidelines of the summit as well.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Cholu. Now let's shift our focus to South Korea, Dr. Go. President Lee Jae Myung proposed a Korea-NATO Defense Industry Partnership 2.0, and the two sides launched talks on a basic procurement agreement. How significant are these steps?
Well, first of all, the NATO procurement market is huge. And I think in the Korean side, the expectation is the procurement market that Korean companies could benefit from will be about $10 billion a year. So it's actually a sizable market. But then it's not a market that's easy to access. It's essentially a defense industrial market. So it's not just about quality of components or weapon systems, but also it has to, the suppliers have to provide not just quality or like quantity, but also trust. because the buyers of defense products, they require not just reliability, but also a sustainment for a long period of time. The sustainment in this case would be the guarantee on the part of supplier that the manufacturers will be able to provide key components and essentially maintenance services for a very long time. So for that to be to take place and to be accepted by the buyers, in this case NATO, essentially there should be trust between the two sides. So in that sense, this agreement marks a very important point that essentially demonstrates or provides essentially guarantee that the South Korean defense product suppliers are going to be considered or regarded as unequal to European suppliers in NATO's own domestic market. So in that sense, it marks a major step. And also there's another side to this, which is about the potential for joint R&D between European and South Korean defense manufacturers. And this is very important because we are at a very important transition period when it comes to military paradigm. The conventional weapon systems that we know of, the tanks and cannons and aircrafts even, they are essentially giving place to a new generation of weapon systems. The best known examples of those are the drones. So autonomy is very important. The AI is being incorporated into the new weapon systems, and this is a new frontier. So even though South Korea had a huge the advantage when it came to building and operating conventional weapon systems, Korea had a huge success in exporting these weapon systems, not just to Europe, but elsewhere in the world. When it comes to frontier technology, such as AI and drones, South Korea doesn't hold that kind of advantage. There are new competitors, new forces around the world that are essentially manufacturing this kind of innovative products that South Korea has to gain exposure to. And Europe represents a major opportunity for that. So in that sense, this defense agreement, even though it's very basic for now, essentially creates a very important gateway to future opportunities there for South Korean firms.
Then, Dr. Go, what would South Korean firms need to do to, have some competitive edge there in the market?
Clearly, it's about, essentially right now, when it comes to frontier technology, South Korean firms should first of all gain a foothold in Europe, setting a partnership with the local suppliers and manufacturers. The problem with the European suppliers and manufacturers is not their lack of technology. It's in fact, it's their lack of capacity. So the technology-wise, the European firms, they tend to be at the frontier, very competitive with the United States in many domains. What they are lacking is actually capability to produce or mass produce weapon system within a time frame that's necessary or fast enough. So in that sense, there's a complementarity between Korean and European firms. Europe can provide necessary experience as well as the local knowledge, in addition to some of the innovation that they're developing. And South Korea can provide right now essentially is a capacity, build products fast and fill them fast in a quantity that's actually sizable enough. So there's a very important, very potential synergy between European and South Korean manufacturers. And I think that's exactly that's something that the leaders of both countries, of NATO and then South Korean presidents, are seeing right now.
Let's hope to see more actual contracts moving forward. Now, going back to Turkey's perspective, Ms. Sachioglu, how is greater defense cooperation with Korea and with other NATO members being viewed over there?
Well, of course, Turkey's stance has always, with defense, has always been all about cooperation. And we have been having a really important talks, and Turkey has been having, for example, the F-35s, that Turkey has been an initial part of the process of F-35s. Then there has been a conflict between United States and Turkey, and that those process was stopped. Now we are hearing that U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that we're not giving the F-35s, he said, and he's also removing the cuts from Turkey. So there is a cooperation that is happening. With Italy, also SMTs are happening. Turkey has its own industry that is booming at the moment when it comes to self-defense, and there are so many important industries that is going there as well, so many important companies. In addition to that, Turkey has been cooperating with the Indo-Pacific partners as well. South Korea is one of them, and South Korea is a contributor to Turkish defense in the name of like small pieces. They're producing for Turkey as well. So this is a unity that is happening in here. Turkey has always been seeing those kind of stuff as an opportunity to grow more of the trust between the countries, be it as the Indo-Pacific countries or the European allies or the allies in the United States and that side of the world as well. So we know that Turkey and Korea has a great defense cooperation, hence why Lee Jae Myung, the South Korean president, was here. And there was an actual summit about that. The Defense Industry Summit that President Lee Jae Myung was here. And we always know that Turkish-Korean relationship is the friendliest ever. We know that those cooperations in between the economy and then trade, industries such as defense, industries and culture as well. So there is a booming relationship between those two countries, and there's such interest about each other's presence because both of these countries have its own importance on their locations that they are currently in geographically, and they actually complement one another quite a lot. So when we consider all of these, it is evident that we are going to see even more Turkey-Korea cooperation in the future as well.
Right, that certainly points to growing room for practical cooperation moving forward. Now, we'll have to leave our discussion right here tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Ms. Sachiolu.
Thank you so much.
And of course, our Dr. Go, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.